OK, alors, salut tout le monde. Bonne et heureuse à tous. Bienvenue au MAUGmeetup. Et en fait, on a un invité super cool avant que je passe à la partie de présentation. Là, je vous parle en français, OK? So I'm speaking a bit in French and I'm saying basically that I will have to try to speak more in English since this guy really, yeah, and like I said, I enrolled him for a special course this morning. It's a 2-hour course to learn French, but he never got at the right location. So, so his French is postponed into another foreign time and area. So, for all these concerns, pour tous ces concerns-là, s'il vous plaît, soyez indulgents parce que ça se peut qu'on parle plutôt en anglais durant la présentation. Cependant, si vous avez des questions relatives à quelque chose spécifique que vous n'avez pas compris, un terme ou quelque chose que lui a dit, attendez, à la fin de la session, on va avoir une petite période de questions où est-ce que je vais me promener. Okay? Vous pouvez poser la question en anglais si vous êtes capable ou en français. Okay? Et après, on fera les traductions nécessaires pour arriver à se comprendre. Ça vous va? Okay, so without further ado, we're diving in our today's MAUGmeetup session, and it's about a very, very cool project. This project is called Envelop, right? And they're based in California, San Francisco. And these guys came up after a couple of years of wandering around with these ideas they had. They came out with this tool that can create Ambisonic system. And you can do it for stereo, which is pretty cool because normally it's just not possible because when you try anything of the sort, you get phase problem and it doesn't work. And therefore, you end up having to put some real output speakers to create this super cool effect. And the fact that they developed this thing in a stereo way, it allows you as a user to really have fun with spatialization of your mix. And I can tell you myself, I experimented a few things here and there, and it's really, really amazing what you can get as a result. It's so tweakable, it's scary, but fun. And then you can even spook people with your music more and more. But that is only if it's your intention. So I'm going to, before I present Rod, okay, I want to just point out something very special because as far as I'm concerned, okay, we do get a lot of different artists and creators in our session, and they're really always amazing people, right? And they have always something new and we learn, and it's great. But I feel that this time it's the case again, but this time is also a historical, I think, time. Why am I saying this? Because in music, there's always been some engineer coming with a new tool that is defining new ways to do stuff, right? And, you know, for an example, I'm gonna give you, let's say in the 80s, when the 80s come in and we switch to digital, a lot of artists that plays with synth were like, I missed the analog vibe. So one guy created, let's say, a super tool that was called the distressor, and it became a landmark for mixing music and giving that tape saturation vibe plus some nice compression that has movement in it. And so this guy created this tool. It didn't exist. It was a special thing, and it really helped redefine an era in music. So a lot of pop artists like Thompson Twins, Human League, they abused of these tools back in those days. So today I feel that this tool is this thing. It's giving a historical value to our endeavors and experience. And I'm going to read this quote from a book that came out a few years ago. It's called The Handbook for Sound Engineers. Audio Engineers Society presents the 5th edition. It was first published in 1987 by Howard W. Sams. So here's the quote. This is pretty cool. It says, "The true history of audio consists of ideas, men who envision, or women, you know, this was not written, but I add, who envision the ideas in those rare products that represents the highest embodiment of those ideas. The men and women who first articulated new ideas are regarded as discoverers. Buckminster Fuller felt that the term realization and realizer were more accurate." So this is the quote I'm using to introduce you to this tool and this guy who's part and creator and behind this tool, the design of it. The tool is Envelop for Live, and this is our presenter today, Roddy Lindsay from California, San Francisco, and the project Envelop. So I let you roll the dice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Richard and Gabrielle, for having me here. Thank you, Montreal, for welcoming me here. This is the 6th time I've been here for MUTEC, and it's always awesome, and it's such a great city. So today I'll be talking about Envelop for Live, which is a set of tools for Ableton Live for spatial music composition and performance. But Envelop for Live is really part of a larger project called the Envelop project. And it was a project that I co-founded about 6 years ago that's really designed to solve the chicken and egg problem with spatial audio and spatial music, which is that there aren't that many venues to experience surround sound and spatial music, right? Most clubs or venues just have kind of 2 stereo stacks. Maybe there'll be some stacks in the rear as well, but not really used for multi-channel or surround sound. So as a result, there's not that much incentive for musicians to compose for a surround, because where are you going to play it? And so we've kind of been stuck in this stereo mode for a long time. Actually, in the 70s, there was a bit of a movement to move towards quadraphonic, and there were about 1,000 records cut in quad in the 70s. But there was a bit of a format war. There were 3 competing formats. Nothing really took off, and it kind of died after 1979. So there was this advancement in the 70s, then we went back to stereo, and we've kind of been stuck there for 30 plus years. And so in that time, the technology has advanced obviously quite a bit. We have these amazing pieces of software like Ableton that allow us to compose music, digital music very, very quickly, and it's very extensible with languages like Max and things like that. So when we started this project, we were really trying to solve this problem at the same time. We knew we needed to do 2 things really in parallel. One was to actually open 1 or more physical venues where musicians could come and compose and perform in an environment that supported spatial audio. And so that's the chicken. And then the egg is we needed to build tools to make it really easy and intuitive for musicians to take their existing music and adapt it for these surround sound systems. And when we looked at the tools that were available, it was pretty obvious that we needed to work with Ableton Live. And so we've really been focused on building out software specifically for live as kind of the tool that's kind of most commonly used, especially for electronic music composition and performance, which my co-founders and I were the most excited about. We also wanted it to be something that was very accessible. So from the beginning, we've made it free and open source. So anyone can go and download the software, tinker with it, create new effects, extend it. People have done some pretty cool things with it. And if you have a Ableton Live license, it's free. So, and the project itself is a nonprofit. We turned it into a nonprofit a couple years ago. So we're doing this because we think this should exist. We want there to be a community around this, and we want it to be as accessible as possible because we think this is the future, and we're excited to bring it to everybody. So, there have been formats, other spatial formats like say 5.1 or Dolby Atmos and things like that, and those are great, and we're supportive of those. But we think there also should be a free and open source version or model for musicians who don't have the means to access those tools. In addition, there's also software for spatial LED control called Envelop LX. Our venues have these 8 columns, which you'll see in a second, that have embedded LED lights in them, and so you can also trigger lighting patterns from within Live as well. So that's a little bit about the project. So back in 2014, we did some initial renderings of what we wanted this venue to look like. So we decided on this 8-column design. Basically, the room that we had wasn't a perfect square, so it's sort of a smushed octagon, which is not quite ideal. You really want to do spatial audio with Ambisonics. You really want a regular polygon if you can, but this is what we had to work with. And so you can see kind of 8 columns. Each column is fabricated in SF. It's with steel, and Salt Lake City it's aluminum. It's about 12 feet tall, one, and then three speakers in each. So one on the floor, one at about 6 feet, and one at 12 feet. And there's a ring of 4 additional speakers on top, and then 4 subs in the corners that you can kind of see. And the initial design had a kind of small stage riser, but we ended up scrapping that. So you can see this is what it looks like today. It's a little bit dark, but
I like it.
so you can see kind of we built a little console in the front there where performers can either perform, although I particularly enjoy, I prefer to play in the middle where I can actually hear what's going on. But some people will compose in the middle and then kind of bring it back to perform. The second system that we built was called the Envelop Satellite, and this was designed to be a portable venue. This was built by Greg Wood in Salt Lake City, and actually we're opening it. This system is going to be a permanent venue in Salt Lake City starting on Friday. It's actually our grand opening. So on Friday, I'll be taking an early flight to Salt Lake City. This is what that system looks like. So you can see very similar. The wiring is all kind of up top there, connected. This was at the Further Future Festival a couple of years ago, which is kind of a Burning Man type of festival. And again, this is the system that is now in Salt Lake City. So by this weekend, we'll have 2 permanent venues, one in San Francisco, one in Salt Lake City, that are both 28.4 channel sound systems that support the Envelop for Live software, and have immersive LEDs as well. And at these venues, we do a host of different events. So we do listening events where we'll play an album, either that was recorded in quad or 5.1, or even just a stereo album that we'll upmix to the room. And it's very intentional listening, so we keep it very dark. People take off their shoes. We ask people not to use their phones, and really just a place to sit and listen to an album, from start to finish, without distractions, on a very high quality sound system that's quite immersive. And we find that people really enjoy it. In an age where most people are just listening to these earbuds and maybe one track at a time. There's something really kind of powerful about sitting and listening to an album in its entirety, particularly albums that are we think of as iconic. Like we have the Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon mix that Alan Parsons mixed in quad from the early 70s, and it sounds fantastic. And half the people leave in tears because it's just so moving. So we do those kinds of events. We do wellness events like yoga and sound baths. And we also do live electronic performances as well. So there's a variety of content that we'll play there. So with that, I'll kind of talk for a little bit about Envelop for Live. And really, again, the goal with this software is to make it as seamless as possible for musicians who are already using Ableton Live to adapt their sets to Envelop or to any kind of surround sound system they have. And the fundamental technology we use is called Ambisonics. I'll talk more about that in a second. But it supports what's called third-order Ambisonics, as well as binaural rendering. And I'll talk about binaural in a second. But what that really means is that no matter what kind of system you have access to, whether you have access to a quad system like we've set up today, or even just a pair of headphones, you can still do spatial mixing. Not only that, once you've created your spatial mix, even if you've done it, just within headphones, you can plug into our system in San Francisco or Salt Lake City or a quad system, and not have to change. You really select, okay, now I'm in a quad system or an Envelop system, and you're done. You don't have to, it's not like taking a stereo mix and then going to 5.1 where you kind of have to rethink everything. Yeah. Once you've built the mix for Ambisonics, you basically just kind of plug in, and whatever system you have, it just works, which makes it very versatile and really compatible with very kind of DIY systems. Like, you can build a quad or 6-channel or 8-channel system, for very little money. All you need is, 4, 6, 8 speakers, some stands. They're pretty inexpensive multi-channel sound cards you can get, and that's that. You can do a lot with a little. So the software itself was written in Max. Most of the code is written by Rama Gottfried and Mark Slee, who are both pretty incredible developers. The software is really pretty incredible. And the original version had a client-server architecture, so you can either run everything on one computer, or you can actually have a separate machine that's doing the decoding to the room. If you have CPU issues, or for whatever reason you want to separate those concerns. It's designed to be very modular and composable, so you can, just like in Live, you can add effects together pretty easily. And again, it's open source. It's all on GitHub, and if anyone wants to contribute effects or ideas, we definitely welcome that. And then I'll touch briefly on Envelop LX, which is the immersive lighting and LED control, which was written and processing by Mark Slee. And we have plugins for using Envelop for Live as well, so you can really compose full audiovisual pieces with integrated lighting and sound together in Live. So I'll talk a little bit about Ambisonics. So this was a technology that was actually invented in the early 70s. And the idea is pretty interesting. So basically the idea is to create instead of mixing for a discrete set of speakers like stereo or 5.1, you actually mix for a virtual sphere. And you basically can encode a signal using a set of what are called spherical harmonics to approximate the location of each source in your mix. And then you can decode it to a particular speaker arrangement that you have. So you can take your encoded ambisonic signal and then decode that to a binaural headphone signal, to 4 channels, 8 channels, 128, no matter, you can go as high as you want. And so this technology was quite advanced for its time, and for a number of reasons didn't really take off. It kind of kept around in the academic sphere for a while. And it's now in the public domain. So the advantages of Ambisonics are it's very flexible, very versatile. There's a large research community around it in North America and also in Europe. And it's really perfect for Ableton Live and this sort of surround sound venues that we wanted to make. And AmySonic was originally built for these microphones, which are these sort of 3D microphones, which can capture a 360-degree sound field. And that was somewhat limited because you can capture something that's happening in the real world and play it back, but with digitally synthesized music, that is where you have the individual tracks. You're not limited by how many capsules you have in your microphone. You can create these mixes that are very complex and have different instruments panning and apply spatial effects to each one, and all of that can live really nicely within an Ambisonic's domain signal. And plus, there's a lot of existing Ambisonics patches with Macs. So when Macs plugged into Live, there's a ton of opportunities for innovation. And then when Live 10 came around, all of a sudden you could route more than one channel between different tracks. So before Live 10, you needed to actually do your Ambisonics decoding in a separate Macs patch. And now all of it can live within Live itself. So you don't need to use tools like Jack or Soundflower or Loopback to do that. Very quickly in Ambisonics, there's a lot of interesting math behind Ambisonics for those of you that are interested in kind of diving into that. But really, Ambisonics is the way that the signals work is that it's a combination of these harmonics, and that you can add different harmonics, and you add channels, and you also add spatial fidelity. So you can see kind of the zeroth order is just omni, it's just one channel, and then first order is omni plus these three, and you can kind of think of it as left and right, front and back, and up down, up down, and the second order you're adding these additional harmonics, and so you can get you can get greater and greater fidelity as you add these channels. So Envelop for Live is third order, so it's 16 channels, and you can add. There are people that are doing fifth, sixth order, lots of channels. And you just add more channels and add more spatial fidelity. But if you're really decoding to 4, 8, or 16, or in our case 32 speakers, third order is fine. You're not going to gain that much by adding additional orders. And the math, you can, if you maybe think these images look familiar, it's actually the math is similar to electron orbitals in chemistry. So it's kind of cool. This is a rough kind of example of how the Ambisonics signal chain works. So you'd have one or two audio tracks here. They're going to go through an encoding. So for instance, you're going to give it a location in your either a XYZ location or a spherical location, and the encoder will create an Ambisonic signal from that information. So you have a mono source, and then a location, and then it'll create an Ambisonic signal from that. So WXYZ, that's nomenclature. That's what we call B format. So that's a 4-channel first order Ambisonic signal. And so then you have this 4-channel signal, and then you're going to go through a decode process. And the Ambisonic decoder basically takes locations of loudspeakers as their input, combined with an Ambisonic signal, and then it'll send the appropriate signal to each loudspeaker. And so adding more speakers is really just a matter of adding additional adding additional speakers to the decoder. And so it makes it quite easy, again, to change from a quad system or an 8-channel system to headphones or whatever you want. Yeah, question?
Does the decoder take care of like phase issues?
Yes. So the question was, does the decoder take care of phase issues? So there are different decoders out there, and they will. So phase is part of the decoding process. So you may have different phase issues, like in your room or something, and you have to figure those out. But the idea with the decoder is to approximate with the speakers that you have what a signal would sound like were there actually a sphere, were there a real sphere there. So phase is part of that decoding process. So again, a lot of people are doing their own, spatial audio rigs at home. This is what one that could look like. And then with binaural, this is something that's really cool about Ambisonics, is that it nicely decodes to stereo binaural using what's called HRTFs, which are head-related transfer functions, which basically take the approximation of what your ears and head, how they filter a sound, depending on where it's coming from, and apply that to the source signal, so that it kind of approximates a surround environment just with headphones. So has anyone ever tried like a VR headset or something like that, where there's like spatial, where there's like sources that are, you sound like it's coming from in front of you or behind you? So that's actually using Ambisonics. So a lot of the VR content uses Ambisonics, and then based on where your head is, it'll use a head tracker and then do a live decode to a binaural signal. So in the last 5 years, there's been a kind of a rebirth of interest in Ambisonics, because there's been this explosion of interest in VR and AR and these sorts of technologies. But also makes it really easy to use Envelop for Live, because all you need are headphones. So if you're on the road, you can compose your spatial mix just with headphones, and then once you have access to a 4-channel, 8-channel, whatever you have, you can kind of lock in your mix, but without doing a lot more work. Cool. Any questions before I jump into the demo?
Just maybe a quick follow-up on the question about the phase and the decoding.
Yes.
I'm just curious, that maybe it's more complicated than this, but like, are the channels just being like adjusted for phase alignment and like level in the output channels, or is there other processing like filtering or
delays?
So it's mostly just delays and level, I guess.
Yes.
Sort of what happens. And is that creating like
and
mic content changes in the signal as well, or?
Yes. So and EQ, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Yes.
All right. Cool.
Okay. Can you all see this? Okay. So the first step to using Envelop for Live is to download Envelop for Live. It's free on GitHub. If you just search for Envelop for Live, it usually pops up. You need to download it to your Max 8 packages folder. And then there's one folder in that called Devices, which... I can't see this, huh? Oh, there it is. Okay. And so these are the Ableton Live, the Max for Live devices here. And so once you have extracted that, the first thing you do is create a track called E4L master. And you want to drag the E4L master bus here.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Do you mind to, because you have dual monitor, do you mind to do a mirror monitor because I cannot see the first screen. I'm logged on your
Yes.
Aha.
for the projector. You can just do a mirror and I'll definitely get both of them.
Mirror this one?
Yeah, I think so.
Try it. Super duper.
Better?
Why is that changing?
Not changing. Can you? Do you have
Yes, I
double
can.
screen on Ableton right now? Is it activated?
Yeah, okay, we're good.
Good? Okay.
Okay, cool.
Sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So this is the master bus, and this is the track that's going to do all the decoding within Live. And so you can see there's a selector here called decoder, and this is where you would select like binaural if you're just using headphones, quad, octo, 7.1, 5.1. So Ambix is just going to give you that 16-channel ambisonic signal that you can then use to decode, that you can use to like live stream, like we're going to do today, or to extract it to a file that you can use for like a VR. If you're composing music for like a VR application, you can then import that into like a VR video editor. So I'm doing a custom one here that I wrote, which basically is going to do quad for the room and then a binaural signal for the live stream. So it's a 6-channel decoder. And you set your output routing here. So this is just a requirement. This is really the kind of a requirement to use E4L as you have this master bus. So then you're going to take your audio tracks and you can apply different E4L effects here. So this is kind of the basic one called the stereo panner. Let's try this. So you can see here that there's this L and this R. So this is a stereo clip. And what I can do with it is I can adjust the spread. So that's actually going to put the sources virtually on both sides. Or I can kind of collapse it into a mono source. And I can start playing with the azimuth and moving it around virtually. There's also an elevation control. So if we had height speakers, which we don't, it would sound like it's coming from above you, from up there. But again, we don't. So, or if you have a graded floor with speakers below the floor, you could have sounds coming from beneath you.
If you have a bass signal, can you split the bass signal like back and front? What would that cause like a bass? Yeah, like a sub bass. Do you need it to have like just in one spot, or can you split it up?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I'll talk about bass in a second. Okay, sure. But just some kind of cool things you can do here. So you could take like all these parameters are just normal live parameters. So you could take like an LFO, like a max for live LFO, and then assign that to azimuth. And now you've got a spinner. Or you can take another LFO and map it to. There. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. Maybe we won't do that. Yeah. So you can do azimuth elevation distance panning, Or you can also do, where's the selector? I'm missing it here.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. You can sort of like realign stuff.
Yeah. So that's the basic stereo panner. So we also have what we call the quad panner. This is for like, so if you want to have, if you just have stereo content that you just want to kind of place in the room and kind of be done with it and not like pan it, we recommend using the quad panner, and that way you'll have energy coming from both the front and the rear. So this is good for kicks, bass, things that, you know, it's hard for humans to spatially localize low frequencies. So you're not going to get a lot out of like doing a lot of bass panning. So particularly if you're mixing, if you're like for like a club environment or for a venue, you know, using just kind of fixed locations for bass sources. And that goes for anything in your mix that you don't want to spatialize. Like if it can kind of get a little crazy if you try to like spatialize everything and like pan everything. I think we found that it works well if you have like some sources that are kind of fixed and stable, and then others that are, you know, that you're panning or applying spatial effects to. So the quad panner is pretty useful for that. Let's see. So this is another. This is just like a simple spinner that you can modulate, like the rate. And if you get it going really, let me turn this up a little bit. Could you turn up the speakers a little bit? Yeah. You kind of get some cool, like, almost like a ring modulation kind of. And again, if you had ceiling speakers, you can also like do vertical modulation as well. So another cool thing is, let's see. So let's just put a basic stereo panner here. So now I'll put a, let's stop there for a second. So one cool thing is you can have an effect and use the returns to do like delays or other effects. I think it works pretty well. So you can just create a new audio track here. Let's put this multi-delay on it. And then we'll send this to the multi-delay. So this is like an 8 voice delay here that you can like spatialize. So again, let's stick an LFO on this guy. that's kind of a cool one. And there's another fun one that's like this like Brownian delay here. So we're actually going to create like 8 virtual voices, and each one of these is changing. It has like a random pitch shift and delay, and then you can kind of change like where in the mix you want your like little guys to go. So you can see they're constantly moving around. You can make it into a pie. And you could like move around the pie. Let's see. It's a little pizza pie. So let's say, cool, we're enjoying that, and then we want to record it. So we can, let's just, so we can actually record the B format signal. And then we can use a sampler.
So you can do that. Holy fuck, that's fun.
So that should... That didn't work. I have not tested that recently. It does work. I don't know what that... Oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not totally sure. But if you have like B format content that you've recorded with like an Ambisonic mic or you've downloaded from the internet, you can play that back as well. So there's other effects that you can play with. There's a maybe I'll just play the convolution reverb quickly. So one thing is you can either take the output of each of these effects and either put them into the master bus, in which case they'll be decoded, or you could push them into another effect. So the convolution reverb is a third order effect. So it's actually going to take a 16-channel AmySonic signal and then apply the convolution reverb to it. So let's turn off this. So it's actually it's a convolution reverb that uses a B format impulse response. So it's actually it's actually a spatial convolution reverb.
It's really cool.
It does take some CPU, so don't if you have too many of them, the system will complain. So yeah, and then there's an early delay, and then a late reflection. So there's other effects in there. I won't go through all of them, but definitely some things to play around with. So I think we have a few minutes left if anyone has questions. Yeah.
Can you see like a much bigger difference if you play it in a stereo sound system, or like does it make sense to use it if
Like
you're
like
playing your track in
like
stereo?
headphones, like with headphones, or like.
Well, in the club, for example.
Yeah. I think it's the same limitations as you have, doing a normal mix for headphones than playing it back, in a larger system.
Yeah.
Like low end, it's hard, it's hard to do with headphones. But I think, a good sort of workflow is, obviously not all of us have access to like a multi-channel system. So I think a good workflow is to lay out your mix with headphones, and then once you're ready to perform, come in like the day of, like, for a couple hours or the day before, and give yourself time to like, it's like, oh cool, this sounded interesting, but I wanted to move it here. Also, anything with the vertical is really hard to do in headphones. Like binaural decoding doesn't really work for height very well, if at all. So anything with height's going to be pretty impossible to do unless you're physically there.
Okay.
Let's say you did your mix at home on your headphones, working your track, and then you play at a club. Or when you play the track, is it going to sound messy because of all the like spatial effects that you put on? Or, like, if the system's not like adapted for that? Or?
Well, you're talking about like playing it. Are you talking about playing it back in a stereo environment?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's a good question. It'll definitely have an effect. I mean, the binaural, pushing something through an ambisonic encoding and a binaural decode definitely colors, the signal substantially. So if you're playing that back just in stereo, like not in headphones, like just normal stereo speakers, it'll definitely have an impact. I think it's like kind of to taste. For instance,
a happy accident.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, for instance, Christopher Willits, who's the executive director of Envelop and one of our co-founders, he did his last mix. I believe he did it through. He did it for, binaural for, basically and said, if you want to best effect, wear headphones while listening to it. But I think he was pretty happy with just the normal stereo mix and played through normal loudspeakers.
If you want, I can add something on my own. When I did experiment with this, what I find is that if you respect the rules of mixing stereo, like you would never put your kick on the sides, right? Yeah. So if you think in that way, and then you do, as he said, your best shot, right? And you come in the venue, and if you notice something is not working, usually it's going to be some low-end value that you maybe try to spread somewhere and it shouldn't, right? Mm-hmm. So what you do is you take that signal out and spread it with a sub and put it in a specific place until it's like cool. And it's going to give you pretty much the same feeling when you're listening as if you're trying to mix in stereo and you're trying to align where is my side and where is my mid. So they can't fight, they have to be breathing. Mm-hmm. And I felt that, when I was trying to do tests with the reverbs, and I said, I'm going to use it just for a stereo mix. So it's just for the fun of it, right? And it worked very well. And actually, it's right that you cannot really use the elevation knob because it won't translate, you're not doing a 4-quad or whatever system. But if you don't touch that button and then you play with the rest of the panning rules, you have this kind of like really envelope that is cool for the sides. So if you understand what you're doing and apply the same engineering techniques of mixing, respecting the mids and side, honestly, you'll be A1. And then when you go to the venue and you have more speakers, just play that thing. And then if something is like not working in the bass realm, just give it a sub for itself, and then just put the gain in your mix. It should be fine. That's what I would say. But it's definitely something like a palette. It has a character. You have to be just paying attention, like any tool you would use for doing, compression, preamp, saturation, all these things. They have their own special end of line. Like the result after you put it is different than before. So you have to pay attention. Is it something interesting for my project or not? That's pretty much what I would say. Anybody some question? Because this is okay.
Can we hear everything together?
Oh, the whole thing.
I'm super curious.
I'm not sure how it can sound. I'm not sure it can sound good.
This guy's a curator,
It's like you can make people go crazy with these.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. But you don't want to overuse it, selectively.
Do you think it'll change the movie experience in the future?
Movie experience?
Yeah. Like, you think it'll be used to mix movies?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that film, 5.1 and 7.1, that's kind of been the standard in film for so long, and now with Atmos. So I think this is one of the instances where film has, like, by far eclipsed music. When you're doing mixing for film, you have to do a 5.1 or 7.1 mix professionally. But music's been stuck in stereo, so now we got to have music catch up. But I think there are a lot of applications. I think commercially, I think immediately there are applications for VR. There's not that much great VR or music, AmySonic music available. And if you're for a VR experience, you really need an AmySonic signal. Like stereo is not going to cut it. So I don't see a lot of music for VR being composed, but I think that's an immediate interesting commercial application of this software.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You should do like the pyramid, but have not a pyramid, but have your set up, go from town to town, from city to city, and have like special shows.
Well, yeah, we actually have this pop-up system that we've been taking to festivals and things like that. I mean, it's just an 8-channel system, but we've been taking it to different places. But so two. I'll close with 3 things. One is we've enveloped stickers here. If anyone wants stickers, right there on the front. 2 is actually tomorrow at the SAT. There's going to be there's a piece that's going to be played using the Envelop for Live, or they use the Envelop for Live software to compose it. So if you want to hear something kind of in the wild, and actually at SAT they made a special decoder for the SAT Dome, which I haven't heard before, but I'll hear it tomorrow. Yeah, there's one at I think 8 and one at 10, I think tomorrow. And then lastly, we're really excited to support others who are doing building these systems in the community. And if anyone wants to build a system like this, please just let us know, and we can help. We can be helpful with guiding in terms of designs and equipment and stuff like that. And if you want to open your own Envelop here in Montreal, let's talk. Over time, we do want to have these in different cities, and we'll have SF in Salt Lake City, but we'd love to have them in other places. And
the stuff that you showed me was pretty small. Like, is there a limit to how big you can make these things?
There is, yes, there's some limit. we haven't touched that limit yet. Actually, our room in San Francisco is only 900 square feet, so it's pretty small, and you could get definitely bigger than that. The satellite system is quite a bit bigger, but if it gets too big, like this wouldn't work in like an arena, because it's just too.
But
just too much. Yeah.
Just what you said for now, true. But imagine in the future if somebody, because I know a guy who's trying to do this, and I think he did it, but he's having problem to solve his issue with corporate world. So his invention will not be available for no one. But it exists. There's speakers that actually shoot, instead of having a driver with a element that pushes the sound like this, there's speakers that actually create particles, and they blow it, they spray it like a spray. It's really fucked up. So the sound assembled in the atmosphere, and you hear it, which is so crazy, because if that existed, then he could do stadium and put it so loud, but you and me have a conversation like this, and you hear me, even though the sound is blasting. So the future is very promising, because this type of technology is ready for even the future, right? So if anybody comes up with a new injection speaker, that's pretty, maybe a little bit crazy, but that would be really fun.
Yeah, there are other technologies that are even crazier than this. Like there's one called wavefield synthesis, where you have like an array of individual speakers, hundreds of them, and you can. It's much higher fidelity than like in Ambisonics. But there's lots of interesting technologies out there, and people are always coming up with new ones.
So that was the trooper, Roddy Lindsay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Rod, for coming over and doing this and presenting this amazing tool. I feel I'm going to close this session by saying this. For me, I remember when I was a kid, and my first experience about the history of music, I understood that I enjoyed listening to the Beatles with a record player, right? And 2 stereo speakers. I had an uncle who had the quad, but it was the version that's not so happening. So we had some goosebumps, but littles, right? But I remember, like before, like I asked my my parents, like what was before, and they told me, oh, gazebo, they were gazebo. You put them there, and then I went and learned about gazebo, and there's quite a big deal of things about that, because even the placement of musician is like a mix, right? So I felt that these guys, these Envelop projects, they are the gazebo of the future. And I wanted to say that as a closing word. And I want to tell you all, tout le monde, merci beaucoup d'avoir été avec nous encore une fois pour le MAUG. C'était encore un grand plaisir. On va communiquer dans les temps futurs les prochains invités, fait que manquez pas ça. Ça va toujours être à Musitechnic qui nous reçoit, puis on est très content de cette association-là. Merci Luc pour ça, qui est ici. What else? I think I've said pretty much everything. If you have questions, don't hesitate. Talk to us on the group. Me, Gab, whoever in the group. We're super cool, open-minded. So don't be shy and don't be afraid. Just ask. And in return, we usually have some nice words to say. So, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Puis à la prochaine fois. C'était le MAUG avec Envelop. Yes.